So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we will be making a return to the ever iconic Helm's Deep, and Isengard are laying siege to it once again, albeit this time we do not have Rohan on the defence. We instead have certainly one faction, but I'd say two factions that are more well prepared to deal with a defensive siege such as this. And that is of course Gondor, definitely very good on defensive sieges, and also there are Dol Amroth troops around here somewhere I believe, although it appears as though most of them are down here in the lower section of the fortress. So Dol Amroth and Gondor, natural allies to one another of course, facing off against the Isengard menace. So we'll go through the attackers first of all. Isengard, we'll go through them fairly quickly because of course Isengard, they're probably going to have relatively similar armies. We have Valkyrie on here, who's going to be playing as the first of their armies. He's actually got quite a lot of Uruk-hai Reavers, maybe more than I was expecting, but not a bad choice actually. It's a choice made with some good information, because of course especially Gondor, but also Dol Amroth do tend to pack on those armour values, and the Uruk-hai Reavers with that AP going to be useful for helping to hack their way through them. Downside of course is they're very they're very vulnerable to ranged attacks, so from the walls Gondor and Dol Amroth's archers should have a very easy and soft target to go after, and one that I would recommend going after as well, because if you do let them get into melee unopposed, though that AP damage they can do even with their lower melee defense is still going to leave a mark on quite a lot of the basic units that both Gondor and Dol Amroth will be fielding, I imagine. Uruk-hai Raiders are here as well, the basic line infantry, so obviously much cheaper than the Uruk-hai infantry, but also nowhere near as good. But numbers wise, it does help. It allows Isengard to play a little bit more like the other Orc factions as far as swarming the enemy goes, and they are a bit cheaper, so when you're on the attack in a siege like this, it can help to have those numbers just to keep your attack going for slightly longer. And he's got quite a lot of them as well, so a lot of the leather clad Uruk-hai are going to be on the field today. He does have some regular Uruk-hai infantry though as well, which of course are going to be stronger as the battle wears on because of their better armour, because of their heightened abilities in melee. They should be good. Also the half-orc Vaneguard, so even more shock infantry. There are fewer of them in the unit than there are in the Uruk-hai Reavers, but individually speaking they are a little bit tougher. They do have some of them have got those shields on their back after all, but also just in general, better armour values, slightly better armour values anyway, and just slightly better stats all around in terms of their defensive abilities. Obviously that's not really the most important thing for a unit like this, but it will still help. Speaking of which, Uruk-hai Berserkers definitely pretty much a no-brainer against opponents such as this. In sieges, I would say Isengard should always be bringing the Berserkers, to be honest with you, because they offer a fantastic tool for clearing out a section of wall, and also especially against armoured opponents. Obviously they're going to be able to do massive damage, and because they're multiple HP, they're going to be able to withstand a bit of punishment. But of course, once those hit points are gone, they become very fragile in a situation like this, so they are very much a flash in the pan. Need to use them at the right time. Uruk-hai Crossbowmen, some more infantry back there as well, but yeah, Uruk-hai Crossbowmen, if you can get them into the right position in a battle like this, we've seen before, if the attackers can take the walls within Helm's Deep and put the crossbows up there, any sort of crossbows, it can be a massive problem for the defenders. They rarely come back from that sort of thing. But they do need to get there in the first place, which is easier said than done. And there's also some pikemen over here as well, which obviously in the late game in particular could be incredibly useful, but they're not facing off against Rohan today, so they can't be sure of having the pike superiority, because of course Gondor and Dol Amroth have basic pikes, but Gondor in particular are very much at home when it comes to waging war with polearms. Then we have Firewolf, who's also got some Uruk-hai Raiders pushing a ram up there, so I imagine he will be going after the gates pretty quickly. He's gone for a slightly higher amount of Uruk-hai infantry by the looks of things, so I mean I would imagine the attack's probably going to wait to group up and attack as one, because you definitely don't want your Uruk-hai infantry being the one to take the brunt of the defender's fury early on, when you've got so much in the way of raiders and low tier units you could be using for that. He's got some Vaneguard as well. Interesting to see so much of the Vaneguard. Some Nazkai back here again. As a general's bodyguard unit goes, you'll rarely get a better one than the Nazkai against a faction like Gondor, to be honest with you, with the amount of armour-piercing damage they kick out, and also an Isengard Ballista, of course, which should be fairly useful for trying to pepper down the fortifications. And then finally, we have Matt 16 Beebor, who has also got some Uruk-hai Reavers and some Uruk-hai infantry, more Reavers, more pikes over here. His army extends further back into the hills, some infantry. He's got some Guards of Orthanc, which they are tankier than the Nazkai to be fair, but they're going to deal far less damage. It's just the choice you make. The Guards of Orthanc are also a bit cheaper, so they do allow you to, well, he's got the Nazkai as well to be fair, so he's gone for his bodyguard units and also some Trolls of the White Hand, so definitely more expensive units in Matt's army. We'll see if he uses them effectively. Now for the defenders, we have the Mark of the Knight, who's playing as Dol Amroth. He's got some standard Doran'ur'ur pikemen without the armour upgrade. Dismounted Knight's the Silver Swan, good for keeping that morale together. Of course, they are on the defence, so their units will retreat to the town centre, but sometimes they have that glitch where they start perpetually routing and they don't come back once they get into the town centre. So morale buffing is still going to be important, and the Knights of the Silver Swan are really good at that for Dol Amroth. Very tough as well. Black Swan Renegades are a good choice because, of course, Isengard, a lot of their more dangerous units at the very least, have got decent armour value, so those maces should be able to crack through the Uruk-hai armour. Tirathea Marksmen. We've got some Athelian Rangers in there. Ethelond Halberdiers, as long as they avoid getting into melee with Uruk-hai Pikemen, which of course they may not have a great deal of choice about, but as long as they're not in melee against the Uruk-hai Pikemen, that armour-piercing phalanx they offer is going to be very, very helpful. Perithal Champions for the Fear, very, very nice against an Orc faction. They'll be really useful actually against the more standard, lower tier Isengard units. More Tirathea Marksmen, the Athelian Rangers are fairly stretched out. Belfast Marines in behind, obviously those javelins will be useful. We've got some Gondor archers back here with the full upgrades. We've got some standard Doran'ur'ur archers without the armour upgrades, and some Wanderers of Nimrodel. I think that's pretty much it. We can see some Gondor spearmen down here, some marksmen of Caer Andros. They're placing their stakes here in front of these sections of wall that can be knocked down, but Isengard, by the looks of things, don't have any wargs, so no need to be concerned about that. Some civilians. There are the mighty Haven Guard. I was wondering where we'd see them. They're pretty much, again, a no-brainer for Dol Amroth when they're on the defence. They're up here on the walls. Not a great deal of other units up on the walls. The rest of back here looked like it was mostly Gondor. Gondor archers up there. Some fully upgraded Gondor infantry. There's some Fountain Guard in there. Again, you'd be mad not to bring the Fountain Guard in a situation like this. Guards of Osgiliath. Fully upgraded Axemen of Lasarnak for that armour-piercing bite. Did I see big two-handed swords then? I didn't, I don't think, actually. Some Citadel Guard. And back in here, more Marksmen of Caer Andros, more fully upgraded Gondor infantry and spearmen, and the Nimlothian Honour Guard holding things down at the town centre. So, I'll make a cut here because I would imagine the attackers are going to take a little while to manoeuvre their way into position, and it's probably going to take a little while before we start seeing a genuine assault up on the walls, and there's only so much I can say about a few archers trading sort of some non-committal blows with one another in the 10,000 frames worth of content, I would imagine. So, I'll make a cut and we'll rejoin when Isengard are attacking the walls. So it didn't actually take quite so long as I was expecting here, as we see some Uruk-hai archers start to fire some volleys over and through actually the gaps in the wall that the Isengard ballista has made. Well, I think the Isengard ballista has used up all of its ammunition doing this. It also got a very close hit actually onto the Haven Guard, although most of this of course is civilians. They may have killed an officer in the Haven Guard unit but nothing else. But the ballista has opened up these gaps. You can see here that Matt's army is also moving forward to raise the ladders onto the walls. And the ram is also climbing the hill to get to the gatehouse. Yes, it's going to be quite interesting here to see excuse me. My voice is already dying and this is the first recording of the day. Bloody hell. Anyway, with the Uruk-hai archers placing down some fire, I think actually the defenders, they're being a little bit too passive here. Like, Isengard is starting to sort of skirmish with them. You can try to ignore them by doing this. And they are getting behind cover with some of their more important units. You can see the Belfast Marines are being targeted, but there's only so much they're going to be able to do, or so long they're going to be able to do this for, I think. Also, I think maybe they're thinking of completely abandoning the walls. You can see these two lads up here who are climbing. The rest of the unit seems to be a little bit less enthused about going up the ladders at this stage. Maybe I did join at the wrong time after all. Are we going to be seeing another one of these battles where the attackers spend a million years positioning themselves and then the defenders just pivoting to face them again, and then they spend another million years positioning to the other side? I hope that's not going to be the case. I really do. I've had enough of cowardice in this game to last a lifetime. Meanwhile, Firewolf. Classic medieval 2 siege pathfinding as the Uruk-hai moonwalk in place. Thinking to themselves about whether they want to move the ram to the reinforced gates there. A lot of the units thinking, wonder if I could survive that fall. Very slowly twisting the ram around. Anyway, enough of that comedy. What have we here? Still taking pot shots, the Uruk-hai archers. They're not going to do a ton of damage, to be fair, especially not against the Gondorian units who are pointing in the right direction. But now, the defenders, they are going to return fire. You can see there as well the Uruk-hai crossmen trying to get into a good position. The crossbows, however, are definitely a unit that do deserve a response, and Belfast Marines throwing their javelins, Doranernal archers firing at them through the battlements up on the walls, which is good. Not a huge amount of them dying off, of course, because Uruk-hai crossmen, decent armour on them, so unless you get like full volleys off instead of just a portion of the unit firing a small amount of arrows at them, you're not going to do absolutely tons of damage. The Isengard army does extend pretty far back to Valkarion's units there. Not a very reinforced gate really, was it? Fell pretty quickly. But a single unit of Uruk-hai raiders is not going to be sufficient to defeat the very substantial Gondorian force that has been laid on. Speaking of which, there are Gondor archers directly through the gap. Somehow that man managed to miss. Actually no, what are they doing? What are they firing at? Not the unit that's right in front of them, I know that. Based on the trajectory. They're still going after that crossbow unit, and they're scurrying all the way back to the back end of the map with their tail betwixt their legs. And again, I feel as though, based on how the armies are laid out alone, I have a feeling that the attackers are going to take quite a while to gather their courage, aren't they? Well, well, at least Firewolf has decided to be opportunistic and try and take out that unit of Gondor archers, albeit this is probably the area I would recommend a single unit assault on the least. Down here though, they've opened up holes. I think what they're going to try and do here is skirmish with the enemy for an extended period. Trying to use stuff like their archers to gain as many kills as they possibly can. They're still firing over the walls with that unit of archers back there, but you can see, I mean, there are a few. I mean, this is the unit you want to be going after. Like, don't bother going after the Tirithea marksmen. Try and go after the Wanderers of Nimrodel. They're much more of a threat to you throughout the game because of the extreme amount of damage that Rangers are capable of doing. Okay, yeah, this is going to be a cut. I'm sorry, I can't be dealing with commentating over a really slow skirmish fight for the next half an hour. So I'm going to make a cut, and hopefully the attackers will find their courage at some point relatively soon. And they have, by the looks of things. At least partially. I'm not sure how successful this is really going to be. Oh, no. I was mistaken. Only a portion of the Uruk-hai Reavers have gone up the wall, the rest of them have been retreated again. Doranernal archers coming down off the walls. They may have used up a decent portion of their ammunition at this point. Or they may be scurrying down off the walls to prevent the Uruk-hai Reavers from getting up there, which is again one of the reasons why you can't really attack in this manner. Like, if you're the attackers, like, you can't have the level of surgical precision where you go after individual units for the defenders, because they can simply move out of the way before you get there. But, I mean, I'll give the attackers some credit. They are going after the right kinds of units. The Mark of the Knight is fairly powerless, actually, to prevent this from happening. The Wanderers of Nimrodel are in full view, and the Uruk-hai archers are going after them now, which is exactly what you want to see if you are Isengard in this situation. If you get rid of one of the two units of Rangers that are on the field, you remove a massive potential obstacle later on. And we'll see if that proves to be a fairly crippling blow, because when you're the defenders, you need a unit like that to sort of mulch your way through large portions of enemy infantry. Not that it looks like the attackers are going to be committing their infantry forward anytime soon. I was wondering why this battle was 52,000 frames. I needn't wonder any longer, I suppose. I suppose it is time for Butcher's work, unless Matt decides to retreat this unit as well after a portion of them get up the walls. And these guys are still just standing proud on the battlements. He's moving the Wanderers of Nimrodel now, but only after they've taken a few losses. I mean, you can see here, There are bodies scattered throughout this lower section, but ultimately Isengard are going to have very little to skirmish with in the latter stages of the battle, which is going to be the most important bit. And here we can see the attackers in their natural habitat going backwards. They're going after the civilians now, although they're going to get more than they bargained for here because there are Haven Guard in and amongst them. And the Uruk-hai Reavers are going to have absolutely no chance against Haven Guard. The AP will maybe cause the Haven Guard to take a few losses here and there, but ultimately the differences in melee defense between the two units are absolutely enormous, and the Haven Guard have also got that extra hit point. The Uruk-hai Reavers are in fact already shaken as well, because this is the problem. When you send forward just a single unit, if you're not attacking in force, then the morale is going to be a real problem for you. What's happening over here? Still just some Uruk-hai Raiders just hanging out. They moved in and then decided they didn't like it. Understandably. Meanwhile, evenly matched? I think not. All it would take probably is one volley from those veterans of Osgiliath or the Gondor archers, to be honest with you, and they would probably rout, to be honest. And in the grand scheme of things, that would probably be worth it, because you're going to preserve the lives of a couple more Haven Guard, which are going to be very, very useful later on. Uruk-hai archers taking some hits, but at this point, like, if they were going to counter fire into the Uruk-hai archers, they should have done it far sooner. It looks like they're out of ammunition now, so it's actually much more of a waste than it used to be. Like, you did the hard bit really by just sort of holding your ground and not firing back at them, and then all of that effectively restraint is now being pissed away unceremoniously as the Dor and Ernal archers fire at them anyway when they're out of ammunition. A bizarre choice, to say the least. And once again, the attackers going the wrong way. Fortress is this way, lads. Infantry is needed to attack the walls at some point. Meanwhile, 126 Uruk-hai Reavers. That was actually a second unit of Uruk-hai Reavers, to be fair. This one is not going to last for too much longer, I don't think. There's some civilians joining the fray as well. Haven Guard have taken one loss in melee so far to those heavy axemen. There we go. I knew the attackers wanted to do this, really. Willingly retreating once again. This is the calibre that we're looking at right now. What's firing there? Not that. Just another unit of Uruk-hai archers. Look at them shimmy down the ladder, look. Look at all those axes. Well, over here meanwhile, still just some Uruk-hai Raiders. No danger of any movement back here. And we're still waiting. Waiting for the moment where the attackers decide, yes, we will send in our infantry. We will attack the walls and the gaps in the wall that we have made. We will force them back. The defenders are in big blobs. We can move forward and perhaps catch them unawares. But unfortunately, we're so far away that they're going to see us coming. Dor and Ernal archers going to be able to shoot directly into those Uruk-hai Reavers, who for some reason retreated down off the wall and then decided to put themselves in full view of the enemy archers. One of the most vulnerable units on the field to ranged attacks. And they're still just hanging out. Oh, hello. What have we here? Unit of out of ammunition Uruk-hai archers charging in. They're going to last a handful of, well, not even a handful of seconds. The Black Swan Renegades tapped them. A volley came forth. Isengard Ballista Crew also doesn't have a great deal of utility, but once again, these units, are they going to achieve anything? The answer, of course, is a big fat no. As I've said before, even units that you don't perceive to have any sort of value in melee whatsoever can still work as a good meat shield if you send them in alongside other units. If you send them into a situation like that, they're really going to achieve very little, especially against a unit with the AP attacks of the Black Swan Renegades against the Ballista Crews. And they're still intent on using their archers, I believe, and the crossbows, to be fair. Crossbows getting into a position and try and shoot. Having to sort of bank their shots a little bit. They will still get a few kills. Dor and Ernal archers there. Belfast Marines shimmying forwards as well. Still a lot of units just waiting, biding their time. There is the ballista crew. Once again, charging into melee. A good opportunity perhaps. A wet noodle fight between the Isengard ballista crew, Uruk-hai archers and the Belfast Marines. A little bit less so now. The Black Swan renegades, that really does tilt this fight into one direction, but Fire Wolf, the hero that this battle needed, moving in a forwards direction with a unit of infantry. He's going to lose this fight if he doesn't commit some more. I would also heartily recommend that Isengard consider attacking the wall in multiple places at once. I don't mind them not attacking up through the gate. Helm's Deep, the way to often do it is to just sort of bide your time at the gate, really start pushing the defenders back in the lower section first, and then when you're really starting to make ground, then you can begin the attack through the gate. But just any old attack at this point would be nice. Half-Orc Baneguard think of joining in, which actually would be quite useful against the Black Swan Renegades. That extremely depleted unit of Uruk-hai Reavers is now making its way in. They'd be lucky if they made it to the Doranernal Archers, to be honest with you, and even, yeah, I mean, I was going to say, even if they did, the Doranernal Archers at this point would probably beat them in melee as well. But there we go. Easy kills. Belfast Marines, I think, are trying to get into a position to use their jabbies. Very close though, so like all it would take is one unit to engage them in melee. They still have their axes out as well. Some of them have got their javelins, but not all of them. They need to be a little bit further back, to be honest with you. Some Uruk-hai archers have made it this far, but their only reward is going to be a melee fight against the dismounted knights of the Silver Swan. Not going to be particularly great for them. Black Swan Renegades continuing to push it. I mean, they're biting off maybe a little bit more than one unit can chew over here. Belfast Marines trying to hit some Uruk-hai crossbows, succeeding, but not very many of them dying, to be honest with you. I'm not sure what the Black Swans are hoping to accomplish here. They're just sort of charging in to a massive mob. I mean, a lot of it is just really like low quality Uruk-hai. But there are Baneguard in there as well, and the Baneguard will have an impact on the Black Swans. And you can see, like, this was not an engagement they should have taken. I'm not entirely sure what Dol Amroth were thinking there. Again, not great, if we're being honest. There's definitely room for improvement there. What have we got going on back here, Uruk-hai infantry? There is yet more movement. Dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan. There are the Doranernal pikemen. Moving forwards, getting their pikes down. And again, I mean, the Black Swan Renegades were really wasted for no real reason there, but I mean, with the Dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan and now the pikes moving into position with a bit of range support, they're still in no danger of actually losing this defensive position because there's not really anything substantial coming their way. Like, still way back there, Valkarion's forces yet to really move from their position of comfort way back there. A lot of Matt's army as well, albeit a smaller army. So he should be leaving more of his army back for later on, to be fair. Valkarion, however, should absolutely be moving forward. He's got some Snarger skirmishes on the way forward now, but I mean, one unit is a token effort at best. He should be sending forward more of his raiders and more of his reavers to assist. Again, just one pressure point being attacked here by Isengard, which is never a particularly good sign when you're on the attack. It's always a sign that disaster lurks around the corner, to be honest with you. And the Baneguard starting to retreat, which is a sign that those javelins had the desired effect. Yep, 76 Baneguard routing off. They just don't have the stomach for this fight any longer. A few arrows coming their way as well. Because Belfast Marines are taking damage from the crossbowmen a little bit further back. But it's worth it to see more of these Isengard units running for the hills. Uruk-hai crossmen are back here, continuing to crank their machines of war and try get some good hits, but they're going to fail mostly in that regard because it's not the best shot for them. There's a slight incline. They're having to shoot over the heads of their own men, albeit maybe not for much longer. These units are not going to last for long in melee. 110 Uruk-hai raiders against a prepared front line of dismounted knights and Silver Swan and pikemen, albeit the pikes are shuffling around as well. What have we got here? Perithil champions thinking about charging out of the walls. I wouldn't really recommend that with a single unit, especially not one as expensive as that. And especially not when they're a Snaga on hand, ready to throw their sharpened sticks at you. But so far, Isengard, not really approaching this in the way that they should. It's back here. Well, we can see more javelins coming in. Once again, going after the Uruk-hai crossmen. I think this is still the problem. I think Isengard are still hoping that they can use their skirmishers to soften Dol Amroth up, and they have. But they really should be doing this at the same time as there being an actual attack going on. Those Uruk-hai raiders are still shimmying in place on the ramp. Some Uruk-hai infantry moving forward. I mean, to give Matt some credit, I mean, that's a unit that's not really messing around. They're still going to struggle, I think. I mean, to be fair, against dismounted knights of Silver Swan, like, the numbers discrepancy there is such that they might lose without support. But again, the theme of both sides being rather stingy in this fight continues, as only a depleted unit of Doran Ernil archers goes to their aid. Maybe some Belfast Marines are thinking of doing the same as well. Ah, they're going up the ladders once again and again. Uruk-hai infantry. Some Uruk-hai infantry. Matt, he's a player actually, I haven't seen his name before, but he's moving in. It took the newer player in the lobby to find his balls first. How about that? Meanwhile, this, not terrific. These Uruk-hai infantry have moved in. They've gotten quite a long way in now, but they're going to easily be stopped dead in their tracks. Athelon halberdiers on one side, upgraded Gondor infantry on the other. They're cut off from reinforcements. I highly doubt their morale's going to hold together for much longer. I mean, steady. Was shaken for a little while, but there is support on the way. There's pikes on the way forward. This is a little bit more like it. Some actual clashes happening between the attackers and the defenders in the gaps that the attackers have made. Multiple angles being attacked. What is that? Wanderers of Nimrodel firing at crossbowmen. I guess it's not the worst choice of target, but I mean, I would probably save ranger ammunition for later. Perithil champions are fear causing though, which may have an impact on these cut-off units pretty soon. Tirithea marksmen stopping their advance forward. Athelon halberdiers. I mean, Isengard are trying to push their way through. Again, it just goes to show that these players did have knowledge of doing these things. I mean, I wouldn't really... Again, like, they've taken a while to start committing forward, but you don't really try to push through as soon as the battle starts, because this is when the defenders over here, they're untouched at this point over here. So there's no point in trying to push through just yet. This is a very substantial force up here as well. Uruk-hai, Reavers and infantry. And for the time being anyway, they're only up against civilians where the two sides are clashing. Of course, eventually they're going to come against Haven Guard, which is a different proposition, but that's still a lot of Uruk-hai that the Haven Guard are going to have to hack and slash their way through if they are to be victorious. Archers back here started to fire, but they're firing right up into the air. That's not really the most efficient use of their ammunition, to be honest with you. Valkyrion moving forward. There's a lot of basic Gondorians down here, giving some assistance to the Dol Amroth men. There's Uruk-hai archers on the front line, probably going to rout pretty quickly. The addition of these pikes on the front making life pretty difficult for Isengard as they try to push through. Belfast Marines up there. Might be a good, I was going to say it might be a good idea to use these ladders and try and circumvent the situation and go down the stairs, which is what Valkyrion is going to do with a unit of Uruk-hai raiders. They won't last very long on their own without support back there, of course, but it will make the defence a little bit messier. These Belfast Marines are going to try and get into a position to fire their javies. They're also getting targeted still by Uruk-hai crossbows. It's interesting that Isengard have seen the Belfast Marines to be a threat. Because to be honest with you, basic javelins like this, they don't really offer too much more in the way of damage, to be honest, than something like the Snaga skirmishers or the Orc javelins, and yet they're more expensive. But they don't offer the punch of a high tier javelin. You've not really been the biggest fan of Belfast Marines and Pelagia Marines, but I mean they are still javelins at the end of the day, so they are still useful at the very least. Javelins connecting with that Isengard blob. Dol Amroth ready. They're paying attention, which is good to see. These Uruk-hai raiders charging down the stairs right into the welcoming arms of some pikes and some dismounted knights off the Silver Swan. And this assault over here from Isengard has also been turned back the other way. So when the chips were down, you have to say the defenders did commit in overwhelming forces to deal with these attacks. But Isengard are continuing to send units in as well. I mean, at this point they've lost enough to the point where they have to go all in. They need to keep committing units. It will be interesting to see who starts to break first. The Trolls are here on the front line. Trolls of the White Hand, swinging those large weapons in a big arc. There's nothing really in here that would deal a lot of damage to them other than maybe the Ethelond Halberdiers, but again, they're a phalanx unit that works better. Say that. The Parathor Champion should be pretty good against the Trolls. Shock infantry, high damage infantry of all kinds. Those Uruk-hai raiders are just sort of hanging out there. They made it on top of the wall and they're fine with that being that. Some Uruk-hai infantry heading down over here trying to stop Gondor from continuing to push back against the Isengard assault. Berserkers on the front line now as well. Yeah, the routing is beginning. You can see the might of the Haven Guard still just mulching their way through the Uruk-hai up on the walls here. The morale starting to fall apart, especially with the support of those archers from down here. Even just basic archers in support will be enough to cause major problems. And Gondor on the front line here, continuing to hold. Isengard, once again, they're trying to push here, but they really should just let their units get into melee and start to do some damage, especially with stuff like Berserkers on the front line. Would definitely do better with that, rather than trying to push their way through a very thick front line that includes some good units. Parathor Champions going to be very good at dealing damage to units that are trying to just circumvent them entirely. Trolls over here should be pretty good against these Doran Ernil pikemen, to be honest with you. The problem is, like, they're not really a great deal of support in and around them. And one of them, of course, did fall to the Parathor Champions. More units coming in, more Uruk-hai infantry, so that's something at least. They're continuing to commit men forwards. Up here, meanwhile, in the central keep still. Again, I don't necessarily disagree with that, though, because that is a very well-prepared area. And over here, starting to lose ground a little bit, the defenders. If they want to hold on for longer down here, they're going to need to commit more reinforcements. Ethelond Halberdiers trying to get into position with their phalanx, more arrows flying in. And again, this might be an issue at this stage. Like, Isengard have used up most of their ammunition in their units at this stage, in just trying to really ineffectually wear Dol Amroth down. Now they don't have anything that can try and counter skirmish as they push through into these Tirithea marksmen. Petrus Osgiliath, of course, they wouldn't be brilliant at that, but I mean, it would be something at the very least. At this point, they're just fish in a barrel to be shot. Uruk-hai raiders up on the walls. The last of the Trolls, only 2 of them remain at this stage. Belfast Marines taking damage to them, but I mean, it's going to be the Halberdiers that will be able to bring these Trolls down. And they look like crossbowmen with their telltale helms. There they are. But not really going to be able to make a great deal of progress here, I don't think. I mean, over here, Dol Amroth is still reasonably strong, with Halberdiers and with heavy swordsmen. Support coming in from the Tirithea marksmen, who've got a decent shot because of the slightly raised terrain over there. Uruk-hai raiders now making their way down off the wall, but they're very quickly going to be swallowed up by the Silver Swan Knights and these Doran Ernil units. I think the dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan were actually on their way over here to try and stop this assault, which I think would be pretty effective, to be honest with you. Around 60 dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan, a decent multiple HP unit. And they are sending units down here. They're sending a unit of Fountain Guard at this point. I think they were thinking of moving in there. I mean, the Bane Guard did move in fact, so they are starting to probe, but I mean, it went disastrously wrong. Gondor archers were shooting and they tried to close the distance into melee, but I mean, just look at the Gondorians that are all around here. Morale situation is not going to be good. Still a troll left alive down here, amazingly enough. as he continues to try and use his giant club to good effect. Back here. Amazing Uruk-hai Raiders haven't already broken, to be honest with you. But they fight on. And this is the most substantial assault. It's got pikes involved, it's got decent quality units, but I mean, with the arrival of some Fountain Guard, with the continued application of those defensive arrows, and actually that, yeah. Marksmen of Caer Andros, are they out of ammunition? They might be. Good makeshift heavy swordsman unit that could be committed if need be. Yeah, those Uruk-hai Raiders are routing. At the very least, they will distract some of those Parathor champions, though, which might give Isengard a little bit of a way through. But if I were Dol Amroth, I would shut that door in their face by using those dismounted knights to Silver Swan. You don't need dismounted knights to Silver Swan to hold battered units of Uruk-hai Raiders at bay. You can use more basic stuff for that. All about prioritisation at this point for the Dol Amroth defenders here in the lower section of the fortress. Pikes and halberds together holding back this wing of the assault. Interesting to see what's left for the defenders actually. Some Snaga skirmishers throwing their javelins over the walls into that area over there, and yes, they have shut the door. Not only with the dismounted knights to Silver Swan, but also with the depleted unit of pikes as well. Those javelins though are going to be able to do some decent damage. They're up on the high ground there. This might be a good opportunity for the Mark of Knight to use his Doranernal archers to close into melee with them. He's shooting at them, so he knows they're there. Getting into melee with them would mean they can't fire, however, and they're in a perfect position to get some good value, especially against something like the Fountain Guard, which is what I imagine they're going after, and yeah, they're doing good damage here. Ah, good. Bit of a delay on that, but Dol Amroth are now getting into melee with them. And they won't last for much longer if they're being shot and if they're being engaged in melee. Morale situation pretty poor for them. Continuing to try and get through here. I mean, the Haven Guard must have a pretty hefty amount of kills at this point. The Vane Guard are shaken. Again, more AP, but the problem is like they're just sort of filtering in. And the Haven Guard's quality is far in excess of what they're facing off against. Wanderers of Nimrodal are here. I mean, that's the perfect opportunity to use the Wanderers of Nimrodal. You're not going to get a better blob in this fight. You might as well start firing in there. Again, this is one of those situations where you're trying to conserve something for later when there won't be a better opportunity to use it later. Uruk-hai pikemen being pushed back against by the Athalond Halberdiers and the Parathor champions. We'll see if that fear causes some of these units to lose their composure. But Isengard being forced backwards, interestingly, by Dol Amroth at this stage. The Snaga, of course, being dealt with by the archers up on the walls. The Snaga on the low ground now, trying to make something happen. The Uruk-hai infantry pulling back out. And at this stage, yeah, without the javelin support, the arrival of the dismounted Silver Swan Knights and the Fountain Guard has turned this fight right around. And Isengard, yeah, well, also that. You can see the Wanderers of Nimrodal are now firing in there. And it's looking pretty bad, I have to say, for the attackers at this point. They don't really have much to show for their efforts at this stage. And it's not as if the defenders have played absolutely flawlessly. There have been some pretty noticeable errors. But the attackers, I think the way they've approached this is everything I don't like. It's been slow, it's been fairly lethargic. Like, they have committed forward in numbers to this engagement over here eventually, to be fair, but overall, just the general makeup of how they've approached this battle has not been all that impressive, if we're being brutally honest. They can still turn it around. They do still have a lot of units in the back pocket. Still Snaga in melee up here, amusingly enough. To be fair, most of these archers at this point are actually not engaging them. It's just this one dude who is going to have to rather slowly use his sword to hack his way through all of those Snaga. A renewed assault over here from the Uruk-hai as well. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. That's interesting. What's going on there? Don't tell me they're routing. No, they're not. They're just retreating. Are they thinking of going back into the keep at this stage? I don't see why, because they're still holding on pretty comfortably down here, to be honest with you. Still a lot of Gondorians back here. Ready, should they be needed. Dol Amroth have obviously taken quite a lot of losses at this point. Gondor have only had a few units here and there. Most of this lower defence has been shouldered by Dol Amroth, and thus far they've done quite well for themselves. No, they are retreating. I feel as though this might be for spectacle's sake, because I think they want the keep to be used, and actually there was a real danger there that Isengard weren't going to be up to the task of actually making it that far in the first place. Uruk-hai raid, like, even as the defenders retreat, they're still making Isengard's units rout, which is rather amusing. Back go the halberdiers. Those pikemen are actually genuinely routing to the town centre. As the Uruk-hai make their way in. Again, this is just an active choice from the defenders. It's not as if the attackers were forcing the defenders' hand here. It is what it is, I suppose. Let's see here. Uruk-hai Raiders still moonwalking in place. They've been doing that for most of the battle at this point. As the defenders scurry their way back toward the TC, they're going to have to leave a rear guard here. Tirithea marksmen, who, you know, they're decent. I mean, they're not the Caer Andros marksmen in melee. They only have like that one-handed sword, of course. But Uruk-hai Raiders are not exactly the last word in terms of quality, so at the very least they'll be able to hold them back for a decent amount of time. The Haven Guard have also retreated back inside the keep, but now, of course, the defenders have got a concentrated force. I really don't know if Isengard are going to have what it takes to come out on top here. Uruk-hai infantry are down there just taking a quick scoot around at what they have left. Some berserkers, some Nazkai, some depleted units that obviously routed and came back. They're sort of scattered around throughout here. Matt's still got his elite units as well, which is something. But I don't think they have the numbers anymore. Like, they've got some of their elites left, berserkers, Nazkai, unit of guards of Orthanc, but they don't have the accompanying numbers anymore that would allow them, I think, to be victorious in an engagement on the keep. Yeah, the Raiders are going to move back, so we're going to make another cut here because I imagine it's going to take Isengard a little while to shuffle their way forwards into position and attack the keep. And when they do, I think it's going to be quite messy for them. Well, I suppose we are now underway. As some dismounted Knights of Silver Swan, some Doran Anil pikemen, and yeah, more Dol Amroth units. Like, Dol Amroth is going to have quite the kill count by the end of this game, because Gondor have really just been waiting in reserve, waiting for Isengard to come forward in numbers, and that's never really materialised. The one time they did, Gondor was there to help prop Dol Amroth up. But other than that, they've just been waiting, biding their time in sinister fashion. Wanderers of Nimrodel were firing in two at the Isengard blobs as well. Yeah, it's gonna be punishing this for Isengard. I really don't see how they can go on to win this unless the defenders literally allow them to walk to the town centre and capture it. Gondor simply have too much left of good quality. Good stuff for holding the line as well. Guards of Osgiliath, they still have some Fountain Guard, Citadel Guard, Nimlothian Honour Guard. All good stuff. Even just basic units as well are going to be pretty good for Gondor here to hold the line. Not really sure how Bilbo was caught unawares there. It always surprises me when people are caught by surprise in a siege battle that has turned into two very distinct choke points. Like, it makes me wonder what they're actually doing, like if they're just sort of like doing something else at the same time as playing the game, because that's the only explanation I can come up with for how these Gondor archers were able to be engaged in melee in such a fashion. At this point, I guess it doesn't really matter. They probably used up a little bit of their ammunition. In come Matt's Guards of Orthanc. A very solid unit, of course, very able to withstand some ranged punishment. Not the most damaging, though. They're going to need some damaging units to hack their way through the Gondorians. All of them, of course, have got those armour upgrades, which are going to be really good against the non-AP units, the ones that have been sent forward right now. And Against Nazkai and Berserkers, Gondor Spearmen will be much less useful. They're trying to push their way up through here, including the mighty Nazkai. Perithil Champions are up here, Havengard are up here, so a bit of a clash of the Titans. This might be Isengard's, or one of Isengard's last rolls of the dice, to be honest with you. There's still quite a lot of frames left in this battle, but I think, again, that's less a case of us not seeing what's going on and just Isengard being, and taking this very slowly. Look at all these units that are back down here. Like, at this stage in the battle, like, I can understand wanting to keep reserves, but at this stage it's kind of panic stations. You need to just sort of throw everything in and hope that it has the martial strength to give you some sort of victory. As it is, Isengard are continuing to dribble units in, and it's not going to work. Again, I don't want to be too harsh on players, but to be honest with you, where my mental state is at with the game at the moment, I'm not in a particularly forgiving mood. So if you're playing crap, I'm going to tell you you're playing crap, and I have to say, not a good attack. Not a good one. Room for improvement in most every way. Matt is the player because I've not seen his name before. I'd say, yeah, much more understandable. The other two, however, I have seen their names before. And yeah. No bueno. And actually, we're already at the point, to be honest with you, where I feel as though we're going to have to ×2 this, because we're in a position where we can see all of the choke points. The Nazkai balance of forces evenly matched. They will put up a real fight over here, but ultimately there's too many heavy swordsmen, and they will eventually be brought down. Uruk-hai Raiders moving in. There's still guards of Orthanc caught in the middle here. It goes to show how tough they really are, the fact that they're in and amongst all these Gondorians and managing to stay alive, but ultimately they're not going to escape. They were committed into a situation that was never really going to go all that well for them, if we're being honest.
The walls are no longer ours. The enemy have taken them.
It only took that long to take the walls, did it? More Uruk-hai infantry getting up onto the walls. This is still Isengard's best and probably only hope, but I mean, they're getting shot as well by archers from somewhere. There's still these Athelian Rangers which haven't been used yet either. Ooh, excuse me. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. You don't say. Uruk-hai Raiders or infantry? Who is that? Who just admitted defeat? Not Valkyrion. It was Matt. Oh dear. Well, I was willing to forgive, really, because of the because of his newer nature, but when you retreat, when you've still got a unit of 64 Nazkai, when you've still got units, when your allies are still fighting on, you instantly make it to the top of my shit list. For shame. Very poor performance. Certainly a black mark. Even if you're going to lose the game, like, the least you could do is just throw everything in and just have them do something, even if that's the only unit you have left. And it's not. You still have 103 Uruk-hai Berserkers as well. Come on now. Anyway, we are going to move hastily onwards. We're going to ×6 this at this point. So I think this is one of those that not been the highest quality game, to be honest with you. I mean, spectacle-wise, it's been pretty decent. Seeing Isengard throw themselves against the immovable object that has been the Gondor Dol Amroth combination. But from an actual gameplay point of view, it's been borderline comedic from the attackers today. Unfortunately, Matt admitting defeat when he still had his elites left. He was saving his elites till the end, and then he goes and does that. Very poor. Very poor indeed. Not the sort of thing that I condone. Yep, the Gondorians and Dol Amroth defenders unmoving. Just time 6 speed is always a bit juddery. Yep, this Gondorian defence. A lot of these units, to be fair, won't do amazingly well against all these AP troops that Valkyrion has moved forward, but having said that, like, they're so fragile themselves, especially against a unit as high quality as the Citadel Guard, that they're going to struggle. They'll do very nicely against the regular Gondor Spearmen, but they're just here to sort of pad things out a little bit. Let's see. Urukai Reavers, infantry, Zerkers. Some Zerkers haven't been wasted in such spectacular fashion. Let's just go and see that again, shall we? Look at these lads. 103. Berserkers, locked morale. Fleeing for the hills. Just thought I'd get that one in once again. Meanwhile, back over here, Gondorian archers firing from the battlements. Now, you know what, we're going to go back to time 6. There's really nothing else I can say about this battle at this point. I am out. Another player admits defeat. Let's see what he still had left in the locker. If anything, to be fair. I think, at least in Firewolf's case, he had committed absolutely everything forward, and most of what he had was indeed finished off the old-fashioned way, rather than a player just throwing in the towel and... yeah. What else can really be said? Yeah, so it's just Valkyrion left at this point. He kept most of his units back, which, to be fair, he had a lot of shock infantry, so it's perhaps understandable, but at the same time his allies needed more oomph on the front line, and he was unwilling to provide. So even though he is the last one left standing and he's not admitting defeat by the looks of things, which is nice, ultimately I can't be too complimentary. Back to time 6 speed as the Gondorians and Dol Amroth forces continue to do their thing. The slideshow-esque effect that time 6 provides as Gondor just uses brute strength to force the Isengard units back down the ramp. There's still a decent number of troops over here, to be fair, including some fairly serious ones like the Urukai Berserkers. But I mean, ultimately it's a losing battle at this point, isn't it? Again, this is one of those that I'm not entirely sure that people should be sending to me, to be honest with you. I mean, I will show it because it's a pretty good example of everything not to be as attackers, but and also just the fact that, again, like I said, when it comes to recording time, in all honesty, like, I do have enough time these days to be maybe a little bit more selective, but to be honest with you, I don't want to spend that amount of time. I don't want to waste this amount of time recording and not using it. And that's just the fact of the matter, but we'll talk about that a little bit more on the closing screen, I think. Because I'm in a little bit of an awkward position, I think, at this point with regards to Reforged in particular. But I think Total War in general as well. Well, Medieval 2 mods in general. The Third Age variants, we'll call them. I'm in a bit of a sticky spot when it comes to the channel as a whole, which is a little bit strange considering but a month ago things were going quite nicely. Now, however, I mean, things are still going fine, like the channel is still performing as it is, but in terms of the enjoyment I'm getting out of it, well, enough waffling for now. We'll wait until the end screen for that. But it's battles like this, I think, that are part of the issue, if we're being honest. They're part of the problem, not the solution. Urukai Berserkers charging in. Oh, hay fever. Even on a day where it's actually raining in July, in such a fashion that would not be out of place in winter. Hay fever still assails me. Meanwhile, Snaga skirmish is coming forward still. Isengard trying to persist with this skirmish style that they have. It's not going to work though. the battle has turned against them in a big way. It turned against them quite a while ago, actually. I think ever since this fight back here, or was it the other one? No, yeah, it was that one. Isengard were looking like they were making some headway there, and then the defenders committed more and they just forced them back, and the Isengard had no answers. And ever since then, we have seen the Athelian Rangers are going to shoot into the back end of those Uruk-hai pikemen and berserkers. Isengard will see if they have the wherewithal to actually notice that and go after them. Doesn't look like they do. The Athelian Rangers are going to remain there. Some perpetually routing units in the background over there. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. Quite so. Let's see. Uruk-hai pikemen. As they roll forwards into position. Defeat evenly matched. I mean, ultimately, of course, we know what the ultimate fate of Isengard's army in this battle is going to be. If I were Valkyrion at this point, I'd just throw everything forwards. Like, there's no point in staggering your assault like this. You've lost. It's over. The dream is dead. Like, your Nazkai is still way back down here. It really would be like the ultimate fitting end if Valkyrion was also to throw in the towel before ever committing his Nazkai. That would really rub me up the wrong way. Oh. Again, Fountain Guard doing their thing. Just in general. The hardy Gondorian defence. Doing what it does best. Enemies just bouncing off of it. Still units back down here again. Uruk-hai infantry. You can tell at this point that he's not really paying attention to Valkyrion, but it's understandable. The battle is well and truly lost, but that infantry could be attacking the Athelian Rangers, at least making it so that Gondor isn't able to carve through that that particular section that quickly. Maybe he's AFK as well, which would explain a few things. I hate allergies in the summer. Normally by June they're subsiding, but maybe the rain has brought them back out. Snaga skirmishers. Shaken. Very tired. Getting cleaved up by those Axon of Lasarnak. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. I think it's going to take more than a military genius for Isengard at this point. Military geniuses in this particular game seem to have been in rather short supply. Yeah, I think at this point it's fair to say that the Isengard player is probably AFK. So, we're just going to be tying 6 in all the way to the finish, as Gondor and Dol Amroth motor their way to the finish line. Run down here. I mean, they'll need to mob the Nazkai in a pretty significant fashion if they're to finish them off. Apologies for my constant snaffling, but that's just how it be. And I also don't have anything to take my mind off the allergies at this point, because it's not as if I can say anything about this battle that hasn't already been said. Victory is a distinct possibility for the crossbows, is it? I think not. Defeat is much more like it. And there we go. Uruk-hai infantry pursuing, fighting. What are they doing? Pursuing the Athelian Rangers? Has the Isengard player come back to life? He has arrived back at his keyboard. Surely now things can turn around in Isengard's favour. The dream still lives. Well, maybe not. It's all over for them, really. It's been over for a while, if we're being honest. Routing, crossbows, finishing off those units back there. certain. Marksman of Andros, they're just shooting the Nazkai at this point. Obviously they know the Valkyrion. Maybe he's not come back to his keyboard. Maybe he took one look and then left the keyboard again. Just thought, eh. If the purpose behind him not admitting defeat at this stage, or not charging in his units, was the other team hoping to make more of a spectacle of it to put it up on YouTube, unfortunately, it wasn't really worthwhile, was it? Because this was, well, again, we'll talk about that on the results screen, which is right around the corner, to be fair. And yeah, that's pretty much going to be that. Shooting those Uruk-hai infantry in the back, they will rout off, of course.
A clear victory.
Yes, a very clear victory. An embarrassingly clear victory, in fact. And with it, we can have a little chat, I think. Because I'm pretty sure you can tell from my tone of voice that I'm not all that impressed with this one. And I'm sure that many of you won't be either. I will show it, if for nothing else than to say, you know, this is not how you attack a fortress, but also because of this that I'm going to talk about here in the end screen. Actually, before we get into that, but we will talk about the kill counts and the armies. Obviously, Dol Amroth getting the most kills. Unsurprisingly, they were in the lower defence that the attackers made a right pig's ear of. The attackers also like admitting defeat. Matt before, you know, he had committed everything, which at least would have made things a little bit closer. A unit of Nazkai, 2 units of Nazkai and a unit of Berserkers in melee would have at least made it less of an embarrassment by the end for the attackers, but as it is, an embarrassment. Nothing else can be said for it. At least Valkyrion stuck around till the end. At least Firewolf committed everything. Actually, Valkyrion didn't really stick around to the end, did he? Because it looked like he was AFK by the end there. Firewolf, at least he can hold his head high by saying he committed everything in and actually fought. The defenders, I can't really say that it was a deserved victory, to be honest with you, because all they did was play the game in a semi-competent fashion, and that was enough to win. As for what did the damage for Gondor archers, yeah, archers of all descriptions, rangers doing well, Isengard holding on to the front line reasonably well, but most of the really high numbers, I imagine, will have come from Dol Amroth for the Wanderers of Nimrodel, their infantry as well. Probably performed really, really nicely in terms of kills. However, this obviously, I think you can tell from my tone of voice as well that this wasn't a particularly enjoyable experience, and it is becoming a bit of a problem, to be honest with you, in Reforged. I've had people ask me to join games. I've sort of had people, you know, a few times actually over the last week or so, and I've said no, not because I wasn't available, which is usually the case, to be fair. Like, my availability is kind of sporadic even throughout lockdown, and to be fair, now that sort of it is technically still summer semester for me, so there is still work to be done, but it's in a fashion to the point where I do still have enough time to be getting involved with games. The fact of the matter is, though, I really don't want to. Like, the burnout that I have for Reforged at this point, Reforged in particular, I would say, it does kind of extend to anything Medieval 2, I would say, but it isn't quite so extreme for Silmarillion, because at least Silmarillion has got some differences. Like, I can talk about stuff that's new, whereas Reforged, I feel as though I'm repeating myself now, and the burnout is very extreme, I would say, to the point where it feels like I'm just going through the motions. And games like this haven't helped, I would say. Like, there is, at this stage, an ever-dwindling supply of high-quality replays that have the theme that people want. It feels like they are much lower in number now than they used to be, which is a real shame, because it has contributed essentially to the dying enthusiasm that I have at this point for Third Age Reforged, which puts me in a bit of a conundrum, because Reforged is what keeps my channel going, and as much as people may say, we'll watch whatever you do, that is not the case. If I were to move away from Reforged and do even just other Total War stuff, many people would not follow. Many people wouldn't. And it would come to the point where, honestly, my channel would probably no longer be viable as part-time employment for me. And I would have to accelerate my plans, essentially, to scale back the channel so that I could have the part-time employment alongside it. Still keep the channel going, of course. Like, that's not what this is. This isn't me saying I may have to consider shutting the channel down. That's not it at all. But it is something worth considering, I think. Not shutting the channel down. It's something like accelerating my plans to scale back to maybe 2 videos a week and then going into part-time employment until February, where I would then be moving on to obviously full-time employment based on my degree, would be something worth considering, I think. That's the situation I'm in at the moment, because to be brutally honest, like the supply of replays that I have has actually decreased fairly significantly. And even the ones that I do have, we're starting to see the same things. We're starting to see Helm's Deep, Thranduil's Halls, Bura Sagath. These are the sorts of things that I get sent on a regular basis. The sort of things that I've shown time and time again. I've also been sent Mistrand, but Mistrand has got a very different problem, which is that it's a big cityscape battle which tends to have crashing issues or very low frame rate issues for me. So again, can't really show them. It is what it is at this point. It's definitely an issue that I don't think can be ignored any longer. And it's all well and good saying, well, maybe just take a little while off, take a couple of weeks to not do anything. Problem is, if I do that, YouTube will punish me for doing that. The YouTube algorithms are not kind, and they will punish my channel for doing that. So I'm in a bit of a sticky situation, like I said. And it does boil down to the fact that ultimately, like, I probably wouldn't be burning out quite so hard if it weren't for the fact that the replays I've been getting have been rather messy in terms of the theme, which is more difficult to get excited about. It's more difficult to weave a narrative. And /or we've had replays like this, which in terms of the actual content which has been on the screen have been low quality. And to be brutally honest, under most circumstances you would say not really worth showing. But, I mean, to be honest, like, I don't really have much else in the pipeline that I would show over this at this point. Like, in terms of big scale siege battles, I'm scraping the barrel at this point, to be honest. And yeah, that's a bit of a problem. It's a bit of a problem. It's to the point, honestly, where maybe, well, I do have a backup plan. Like, I won't let it get to the point where I have literally nothing I can do. There is something that I could do. But yeah, that's the situation as it stands. So take that for what you will, but I'm going to have a little bit of a think about things, I think. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found my sort of defeated rant here at the end somewhat informative to where my mind space is at with regards to all things Reforged at the moment. And I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.